Welcome back to the Caucus Corner, the podcast where policy meets the people. I am your host, Assemblywoman Mikal Salaj, chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus. Each episode, we spotlight the issues impacting communities of color and amplify the voices driving meaningful change. Today, we are diving into a bill that has the potential to transform education in New York State. Across this great state, too many schools still rely on outdated and harmful disciplinary practices that push students out of the classroom and closer to the criminal justice system. As legislators, it's our responsibility to make sure every child has access to a supportive, safe learning environment that's grounded in equity, dignity, and an opportunity. That's where the Solutions Not Suspension Act comes in. It's a bill I'm proud to sponsor alongside Senator Jackson. So let's meet everyone joining in on the conversation. I first want to acknowledge our great senator, Senator Jackson. Are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Well, we hear you loud and clear. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Just working hard over the years in order to represent the communities that I represent and being involved in the Parents Association of my kids' school, which goes from K to 8. So I was involved for 19 continuous years on the Parents Association and saw some of the conditions that existed at the school, where overcrowded classrooms, this, that, and the other, and elected to the school board, in which helped me to get a broader vision of my entire district. And as a result of that, that led to filing a lawsuit on behalf of the children, not only in District 6 in Northern Manhattan, but the entire city of New York and the state.
Well, thank you, Senator, for being such an amazing advocate for equal access to education. Next, we have the Senior Policy and Advocate Associate for Citizens Committee for Children of New York. Caitlin, how are you doing?
Hi, Assembly Member. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having us. My name, as you said, is Caitlin Passaretti. I'm the Senior Policy and Advocacy Associate at Citizens Committee for Children of New York, where I hold the Youth Justice, K-12 Education, and Child Welfare portfolio. So excited to be here today and have this conversation with you.
Next on the line is Program and Policy Manager at the Westchester Children's Association. Angel, thank you for being on.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Angel Gray, as mentioned, and I am the Program and Policy Manager at Westchester Children's Association. I'm super excited to be here to speak further on the Solutions Not Suspensions bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then last, but definitely not least, we have the Director of the Campaign and Organizing at the Children's Center. Stevie, how are you?
Thank you so much for having me. As mentioned, my name is Stevie Vargas, Director of Campaigns and Organizing with the Children's Agenda based in Rochester, New York. So happy to be here. A lot of my work has centered around ending the school to prison pipeline and making sure that we are fighting for proactive responses to harm as opposed to reactive ones, and really excited to discuss solutions, not suspensions.
Thank you to all our guests. I'm excited to kick off this conversation. We hear a lot about school discipline, but let's break it down. What does solution, not suspension, do? And how does that ensure that students, especially those from marginalized communities, are empowered in their education?
Happy to take that. So first, I like to address what is solutions, not suspensions, and really, it's a piece of policy that we have the opportunity to pass in New York State that addresses an urgent need. Right now, schools should be places where students are welcomed and supported in their learning and their development. But right now, across the state, New York children are facing expulsion for normal, age-appropriate behavior. And this loss of instruction is having detrimental effects on our students. And this bill puts forth a solution which really focuses on getting to the root cause of why we are seeing these disruptions and what we as a community can do to support our youth. So when we look at solutions, not suspensions, it would cap suspensions. Right now, you can suspend a student for up to 180 days days. That is a full school year. And we know the data shows that when a student is suspended from school, the likelihood of them returning or even graduating diminishes it significantly. I'm happy to pass it to any one of my amazing colleagues and advocates in the fight to share more about the bill.
Thanks so much, Stevie. And yeah, suspending a student for a full school year is just absolutely astronomical to me. And so the core of this bill is to make suspensions a measure of last resort. We need to have stabilizing measures that interact with a student prior to a suspension. I very specifically, though, we do want to curtail suspensions for our youngest learners, students in pre-K to grade 3, unless it's required by federal law. Right now, we are suspending 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds up to a full school year. And we know we can't be doing that with our youngest learners. This is when we're learning our core competencies, social engagement. And so we really need to make sure that that is not allowed. Currently, the education statute has a lot of vague language that we know can lead to high levels of disproportionality, which we can get to the stats on that in a little bit. And then we also would so we would need to eliminate that vague language to be very clear, and we make sure to not target any specific students. And then also ensuring that charter schools are provided the same protections and due process for the students who live there, go to school there. Angel, please hop in if I've missed anything else. Or if
No, I think you both covered it very nicely. I just also wanted to add like the understanding of why this also came about, because when we see those disproportionate impacts on students of color, our students with disabilities, our LGBTQ plus students, like where the data is showing us a certain thing, that many of our students throughout New York State are being suspended for certain behaviors that their peers are not being suspended for. So really kind of looking at those numbers as well and seeing who's being impacted, how often are they being impacted, and what these school suspensions are leading to. As Stevie had mentioned earlier, the likelihood of them returning to school, it really drops once you have these suspensions on your back and continuously go through these experiences. And understanding as school folks and people working within this realm, we have to really take a look at the impact that that has on students, on families, on communities, and really being mindful of the importance of this bill with the key components that were already addressed, because this is what we're seeing in our numbers. And in order to really respond effectively, these things have to be at the forefront of the conversations in order to protect our students moving forward.
And it's really important to prioritize that equity and that restorative practices over punishment. And I know, Senator Jackson, you really have been championing this bill alongside me. We're both the sponsors. But what inspired you to champion Solutions Not Suspension Act?
Well, we're knowing that, just the maximum you could suspend a child is an entire school year is just absolutely crazy. That's not the type of system we want, and that's why part of the campaign for fiscal equity lawsuit was to bring the type of resources so that you can have social workers and psychologists in order to assist parents and students in the process of making sure that the school has school leadership teams where they're discussing what are the type of issues that are happening in the school and what's going on as far as communicating with students about issues and concerns they having. So you bring it forward, and if there's problems, then we need to resolve those problems in the school, and specifically with the children that we have in our school district. Since when you look at a lot of the students that are being suspended are children of color and maybe of higher needs as far as their homes are concerned. So we have to talk to them and their families and see how things are and make sure that we monitor what's happening with the children in order to make sure that they stay in the classroom and getting the type of education they rightfully deserve. That's extremely important in the process. And we have to tell the school administrators and people involved in leadership that we expect that you respect the children just like if they were your own children, in order to talk to them and find out what the issues are and how we can resolve those. And that's what parent activism is about, in order to make sure that we save our children.
And I appreciate everyone's advocacy. I know that we are building support and trying to move this bill forward. What kind of responses have you received from your advocacy, whether it's from school districts, teachers, families about this bill?
We've gotten an incredible amount of support. I'm speaking specifically for the Rochester community, Rochester City School District, up here, basically in Canada, if anybody's listening from New York City. The response has been astronomical in when we think about the need for it. We recently had our Solutions Not Suspensions Advocacy Day. We had a full bus packed with families and students to head to Albany to advocate for this bill. And hearing young people share their stories about how lack of policy is pushing them out of schools, how it makes them feel, how it diminishes their self-worth. It really leaves a lasting impact on you. Unfortunately, we need this policy due to, I would pose it as a lack of common sense in some situations. A lot of our students will be suspended for simply leaving the classroom so that they can cool down. So what are we telling our students when we are effectively kicking them out of an educational opportunity when they are taking measures into their own hands to make sure that they are not causing further disruption? So I look at this policy as an equity issue and making sure that we are putting forth protections for our students so that they don't further to have their educational rights infringed upon.
I completely agree with what Stevie said. I'm based in New York City. New York City as an entity has in place certain safeguards, I guess, against some suspension. So in New York City, you cannot suspend for more than 20 days unless there's a outstanding federal law. However, we still know that our state needs to have this bill, and New York City students still need to have this bill. I think that the Advocacy Day showed how powerful the people are and how powerful our voices are. Having young people speak, having parents speak, and community members and teachers all come to the rally and meet in our meetings with elected officials. I think there's also a lot of education that happened during our Advocacy Day. There are people who didn't know that New York State suspends 4-year-olds, and that's understandable because that seems egregious that we would do that. But so like I felt in a lot of the meetings we were having that there's a lot of shock at where we were. And there are a lot of other states who have gone further than New York has in protecting their students. So we're really excited in moving New York along in student protection and student supports and creating the schools to be a better environment for everyone who is there.
I'm glad that I can confidently say that folks throughout Westchester County support this bill as well, because they're seeing the importance behind it. They're understanding the fact that we have students navigating through a system that was really implemented to support them, to help them grow, to help them succeed. And yet in these very same moments, these students are going through lived experiences where they're seeing for themselves that this system is not treating everyone the same. So they're noticing the behaviors they're being suspended for versus their peers. And they really begin to internalize it. We've heard the stories of how they name it, put words to these experiences, and how it has thus created this deep disconnect or distrust between this very institution or system or schools that are meant to support them. So we have folks all around Westchester County who are just, as Steve had mentioned, it's almost a common sense bill where it's like, we know that we need it. And then that whole fact that we're seeing an increase of suspensions for that pre-K through third grade is something that is constantly brought to our attentions at alarming rates, and just so much concern behind it. Because when you're 3 years old, you don't just see a 3-year-old, you're seeing a 4-year-old or 5-year-old. You're not just seeing that one child, you're seeing that full family unit. So for having students go through a school system that's pushing them out instead of actually providing support and proper actions to address whatever disciplinary actions took place, then we're really doing our students a disservice, and our students connected to our families, connected to our communities, and those cycles can be perpetuated as time goes on as well.
And Stevie, I think, and the other advocates. That's why I say it's so important that parents are involved in their children's education, and knowing that, for example, the school leadership teams, if they're having them, that's where parents need to say, well, where's our social worker? Where's our psychologist? Or children are coming in having 3K universal universal pre-K, which is 4 years old. And so they're learning in the process as far as their behavior, and they're learning from each other, and teachers there to guide our children as to what is right and what is wrong and things like that. That's so important that we teach our young children about manners and behavior, and things that, if, for example, if one is hitting one because they have a toy or a puzzle or a book that they're reading, we need to communicate and teach them. Obviously, the parent involvement is very, very important in this process. But it's important that that happens in order so that we can evaluate how are things going, what do we need to do, but also part of our job as legislators and parent activists is to educate the other parents to be involved, so that decisions can be made where we can move this. So one of the things that I say to people, even if we were in a press conference with 300 people, parents there, each one of you should reach out to your state assembly member and your state senator, and even your local school board, in order to advocate for that, by making a phone call, by texting or email, and putting pressure on us to do the right thing on behalf of ensuring the safety and security of their children, and making sure that all of the children have the opportunity to learn without being punished for things that normally children of that age would normally do, but also knowing that, for example, especially when it's realized that some of the things that some of the children in schools are being quote unquote punished for, it seems as though that mainly there are black and brown children, and not everyone that is doing that. So it's important that we learn from one another, but also we have to speak up and fight back also. And I don't want to say fight back, but it's about organizing ourselves and working together in order to make positive things happen. And that's what the campaign for fiscal equity was about. That's why uh, community schools are so important in the process. And so that's what we need to do here at the state senate, as far as reaching out to all of the members and asking them to, are you signed on to the bill? Why aren't you? What's the problem? We need your help. We're doing this on behalf of our children. These are the type of things that we have to do to put a little more pressure on legislators to be uh, doing things that benefit our children.
And I just want to address the elephant in the room, because there are folks who believe that if we pass some type of change to disciplinary actions, that and we reduce suspension, it means that we're lowering standards. How would y'all respond to that? I think it's false, of course, but like what would be the response to school leaders or local elected officials who say that?
Nothing makes me more angry than a false narrative. So again, one of the common misconceptions about this bill is that we are taking a disciplinary tool away from schools and administration. When again, this bill specifically addresses normal age-appropriate behaviors that our youngest learners are being suspended for. So we're talking about things like insubordination. What does insubordination mean? That's very vague and dependent on the person who determines if somebody was being insubordinate or not. As somebody who was a what would be described as a lippy kid, or somebody who would continuously ask questions because I don't follow things blindly. And it would be considered talking back. That could be considered insubordination, which I did get in trouble a lot for as a youth. And now I'm a parent to an 8-year-old who asks an ungodly amount of questions because if you tell him the sky is blue, he wants verification. And that could be seen as disruptive in a classroom setting when you have a teacher who has a classroom of 24. She can't answer, so she or they cannot answer so many questions. So what we see is we have youth who might be considered more rambunctious, or might be differently able. They might be on the spectrum. And if we are punishing them for needing extra supports, that is our burden, not theirs. So again, this bill would require school codes of conduct to include restorative approaches. It would limit suspension days to no more than 20. So we shouldn't be suspending kids for dress code violations. Now, if a student comes to school with a weapon, this bill would not impact that situation. So there would be accountability. And we need to talk about or re-envision or reimagine what accountability looks like. For some people, accountability means punishment. But I think for us, for parents, for students, for teachers, for people who are interacting in the community on a daily basis, accountability means having hard conversations, taking a beat to get to the root cause of any situation. Because if we are continuously throwing children out of the classroom because they did not respond well to a disagreement of some sort, we are teaching them that they are not a part of society, and that has detrimental impacts on the long term.
Yeah, and to build off that, there is no data that suspensions work. So the problem is that there is no corrective behavior change that happens with the suspension. You suspend a child, and the only outcomes are negative. We see lack of trust in your school community. We see poorer grades. We see higher chances of dropout. We see more interaction with the criminal justice system. We see more parents losing a salary because they have to figure out a child care mechanism now. And then the child's behavior also is not corrected. Whereas this bill intervenes in the way that no tools are being removed from education personnel. We're just hoping to add tools to our toolbox that would allow for there to be a behavioral specialist, check if there's a need for an IEP, is there dyslexia? There are so many more checkpoints in with the student to see what is the root of this behavior, what is happening at home, what is happening on the walk to school, what is happening with friends. And that way, when we take that time, we will see corrected behavior change, and we will see stronger like pro-social behavior, because we see children and high school students who are also children express their needs and be respected, seen, and heard by an adult, which is something we do not award children enough.
Yeah, and just to quickly add on to that, I think this solutions not suspensions is really about raising the bar. And when you really think about it, because we're changing the ways we interact with and support and guide students. So we're not ignoring the misbehaviors, or we're not even letting them slide. It's just about shifting from this mentality of like strictly punishment to, as Stevie had mentioned, bringing in the accountability component of it so that we can see the growth, so we can identify a behavior, put some words to it, and figure out how do we move forward in a more cohesive and a progressive manner. Until like these restorative practices, they really take a lot of effort. They really encourage more communication, and you have to focus on building that relationship in order to create spaces where students are confident and comfortable with you to discuss their behaviors. Even those ones that do not feel comfortable may have led to negative consequences. But when we're able to kind of allow students to feel what they're going through, put a name to it, and then find corrective behaviors to move forward, as Stevie mentioned, we're not going to push them out and isolate them. We're allowing them to create and exist within a community that is, again, meant for them to grow, learn, and thrive in. And it also allows them to mirror these behaviors with their peers, really kind of having this trickle-down experience where it's like, I know we're going through X, Y, and Z, or I know we want to do X, Y, and Z, but here are the consequences. So really allowing students to have that shift of a mindset in the way of thinking and being and responding in certain manners. So it certainly does not lower the standards. Again, I really truly believe it raises the bar to a level that not only supports students, but the entire school system and schoolhouses as a whole.
And I'll just quickly add, again, New York City already has these protections in place. So this bill would expand these protections to students all across the state, because as it stands right now, we already have students who have protections and some who don't, based on where they live. And we cannot continue to have students in situations where some have protections and some don't. We just had a very successful legislative year, well, depending on who you ask. But we just passed the cell phone ban. I look at this bill as a bill that accompanies that or complements that. How can we make sure that we are making our schools safer environments across the board?
And clearly, to me, those are the things that that the school, not only the school, but the school, the actual districts should have it in place. And questions should be asked by parents. Okay, do each school has a social worker or a psychologist, or there's a psychologist or social worker working with 2 or 3 schools? And, when are they here? When can I see them if a parent needs to see those individuals, those professionals? But also to make sure that there's a teamwork approach as far as the educators, the teachers, and counselors are talking to the parents if, in fact, there are problems or the child is not behaving appropriately, or the child, as you know, we passed a universal breakfast and lunch for every child in the entire state this budgetary process. And so many children used to come to school, they may be hungry, they may have not eaten some food, and that's extremely important for their health. And hopefully Pete, they could sit down with other students and or adults, and then have their breakfast and their lunch, and then be positive going into a classroom. So we have to give them the type of images that we are doing, so that they know this is acceptable behavior, or if in fact, if it's not acceptable behavior, this is not acceptable behavior, and this is the right, telling them what the right thing to do and how to behave. That's learning, and it's okay. So that's what I hope that would happen this time. And as far as everyone, if you can communicate with parents to make sure that they're communicating with their representatives at the Assembly and Senate regarding this bill, that would be a lot of help overall, because that puts a little bit more pressure on us to do what has to be done. And I hope that the governor, when these bills are signed, that the governor will then sign it into law. And that's so important in the process, because the state legislature has assembly, senate, and the executive branch, which is the governor. And so that's why parents, if they're involved, they should know about what are the needs of the school. How much more money do we need in order to make sure that there is a social worker or a psychologist in the school, and start advocating for that, so that we can make sure that you have everything that you need in order to make sure that we have the best environment for our children to learn.
Well, thank you, Senator, for giving us a call to action. We are going to need the collective in order for us to push this piece of legislation. And, to all of our guests, your insight, your passion, your commitment to reimagining how we support our students is admirable. So thank you. Solutions Not Suspension Act isn't about policy. It's really about shifting the culture of our schools to one that's rooted in dignity, equity, and opportunity. Our children deserve more than punishment. They deserve support, compassion, and a real shot at success. So thank you. And we're going to be pushing this bill. So to all listeners, please help us. We want a brighter future for New York, and it starts by keeping our kids in a classroom and out of a system. So until next time, thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for having us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.